So my name's Jared Casey. I'm here with Jill. And what's your last name these days?
Hatch.
Hatch. I asked because I knew her a long time ago. Like I feel like forever ago.
High school.
High school days.
Mm-hmm.
We were Silver Wolves over at Fremont. Long time ago. And Jill has graciously been willing to come on the Corner Cove podcast and share some of her story. And hopefully I don't embarrass you too much about old things from the past or whatnot, but
it's hard to embarrass me.
So why don't you share how we met? What do you remember of us being old friends and stuff?
I remember one being at your house in Pleasant View, right? And you guys had like a ropes. I don't even know how you describe it. We were hanging out on ropes, so some were making out, some of us were having fun.
Can it be both?
High school.
I
don't know where Jared was. I was the one having fun.
I was off in the woods probably.
But I remember that. And then our last day is our senior day. Everyone was having parties all over, and somehow a few of my friends and Jared ended up on the catwalk to sleep for the night over the freeway. And so that was our senior night, and we didn't sleep. We just talked, I think, a lot about what our futures were going to look like, what we're going to do. And that's the last time I saw Jared until like 6 months or so.
Fast forward 25 years or something.
Kids texting.
So it's interesting how that works, huh? Yeah, the old twine hut is what we called it. So my friends and I, we took old farmer baling twine because it would come off when they used the hay, they just hang it on like a hook, and they'd have all these piles of twine. Like, oh, that's cool. And they were already looped, so we just learned how to tie them and double loop them, and we made these giant spider webs at the trees.
Yeah.
At one point, we had 3 stories, and they're about 10 by 10 on some stories, 10 by 15, and maybe a little bit smaller on the top one. And we're like, let's add some bridges. Let's go like Robinson Crusoe on this thing. So there's these big willow trees all connecting. So then we built extension bridges, and we had old materials. My dad was a roofer, so we had all these boards that he used to use. So almost all the material was free, and we spent a lot of summers just building that. Me and my friend Corey Jones basically built it all with a tiny bit of help from other people. They get bored and walk away, but we had 2 motivations. One was, this is fun and cool. And won't girls think this is awesome?
And we did. We thought Jared Casey was so cool. So was his house.
So we put a big fire pit down there, and it was like the hangout for quite a few years. Just people came out and had fun, and big old marshmallow roasts and stuff.
Yeah.
And then you and I found a mutual friends, and that we tried that crazy catwalk night, and that wasn't very successful, but it was still fun.
Yeah. And I don't know who wants to sleep on cement across the freeway, but
I think I brought a blanket. Yeah. That one was super awesome.
So yeah.
Fun. And then we had our life figured out, look forward, and you just see the future, and we knew what we were doing, right?
We sure thought we did.
So where have you been since then? So what's been some of your journey over the last 20-something years?
Well, where do you want me to start? There's a lot. What do you want me to share in this time frame?
Well, maybe what you thought it would be, and maybe how it has been. That could be a good theme too, because sometimes I think we can see a little bit further down the tunnel than we realize, and then sometimes we can't.
Yeah. So I think if I was envisioning myself, and I can't remember that this was conversations that we had that night on the catwalk, but I think we were talking about what our futures were looking like and where we were going, what we're doing. And for me at that time, I would have told you 100%, I just wanted to be a mom, a stay-at-home mom with my kids, and wanted to have lots of them. And that was what my hope was for my life. And I have had 6 babies, and I am a mom. And there were times and there are times still where I'm like, I hate this. But for the most part, I love it. Don't get me wrong. But it's hard. It's hard. And I've been a stay-at-home mom since my first was born. But before that, I went to college at Weaver State. I thought I wanted to do communications so that I could be a public speaker. and be on the news. So,
Oh, yeah.
hey, here I am.
I think I took that class, the public speaking class.
Yeah, and I took it, I started it, and I hated all the communications classes like a few weeks into it. And so my husband's like, maybe you need to look at something else. And so I got out the Weber State catalog and changed all my classes to do child and family studies, just like
super mom studies.
Right after, yeah. And I took those classes thinking I knew everything. I was so smart, had all the right answers. I just look back at the ladies who were a little more seasoned in my cohort, how much they must have laughed at us young kids that thought we knew everything at that time. I realized really quickly that even after college education, every kid that was born, I knew nothing. I had to retrain myself. But yeah, so worked for a few years, kind of had a hard time with some health stuff, getting pregnant and working on that. Was on a lot of medications to try to help. And then I ended up having 3 kids 2 years apart, which was, I feel like, miracles and a really big blessing for me. And so that was where I was at that time. So did you want me to go into the part of the story you asked?
Well, I think just a couple things to recap. Okay. Just being a mom, that's a big challenge. And you know, you look at today's world, that's becoming harder and harder to obtain for a lot of people, because that also means like having an income that's to support a home, and a lot of homes are double income now. And the knowledge, like even if you study all the knowledge in the world, every child is so different. And I'm a father of 5, and I still don't feel like I know what I'm doing. And I have a 19-year-old all the way down to an 8-year-old, and I went to school to be a marriage and family therapist. I should like be a professional father, right? No. Every kid is uniquely different, and there's a challenge with that. So the ambitious goal of being a good parent, just sometimes it's just be a parent. You hope to be a good one too. Yeah. But I see that as a very noble cause, especially where you were and where you are, and in the world we live in today, it's becoming a harder thing to obtain, at least in the United States. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. Where did it so you had the vision, you see, I'm going to be a mom, I'm going to have a family. What kind of changed for you? I mean, I know that there's a lot that changes for all of us, but what shifted your future focus and things a little different?
I guess I don't know what your direction.
So we have the vision of what life would look like, could look like. How did it really look?
Well, so I had my 4-year-old, and well, he was 2, and we had a newborn baby, and it was 2008 when the crash happened, and we had 2 homes. My husband's work had filed bankruptcy, and I was in a high level of stress. And I felt like after that, it just snowballed for a couple of years into very, very high levels of stress. Had my 3rd baby right in that time frame, and same thing, just got to where I felt really unhealthy. I was not in a good place. I hated being a mom. I was home, and there were times where I was just like so resentful or hateful, and I felt so crappy that like seeing joy in their experiences and as they were as littles was not happening for me. And I put a lot of blame on myself. Felt like I didn't know who I was anymore. Was really struggling as far as what I thought I would feel being a mom, that I would have this feeling of like, oh my gosh, this is just so rewarding all the time. And the feeling of just more, I was giving and my bucket was empty and nothing was giving back. And I just felt really low.
Mm. Well, and to look at that time frame, I mean, I experienced some of the same stress, during that time. I went bankrupt too, and went through, lost our investment property, and it was horrible. Like, and we, in my family, like that knocked me back. Like, to maybe call it like a similar feeling. I felt like I wasn't a good provider. I felt like I had failed in business and hadn't finished college at that time in my life. So I was like, man, now what am I going to do? I took a job as like a waiter, and it was like a very low point. So for those who didn't or don't know or how that era was, it was almost like a mini depression or a Great Depression in our country, where industries were collapsing, jobs were not working so well, and a lot of people were experiencing a lot of despair. And during those kind of times, anxiety, depression, suicidality, they all go way up. And if you go back to like the Great Depression era, when they had their hits in the early 1900s, despair was at an all-time high. And then you fast forward to events like that, despair, all-time high. And that's now a personal piece for there. And then you take that timeline, you actually put it in today, like so the year is 2025 right now. Our depression despair levels are almost double what they were in the Great Depression. This is post COVID, another dangerous time where people really hit things, and the fallout for COVID is happening now. So for anyone who's watching, like, you've experienced these moments, you're experiencing them right now. It's 2025, and how do you work through those things? I know for me it was a super big challenge. How have you worked through that phase of your life, and potentially even how we're working through it today? I know the things kind of connect to each other.
Yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit more about that part. A couple years, so then I had another baby, and after I'd had her, um, I feel like at the time it wasn't talked about as much as like having, what do they call it, like after you've had your baby and you're depressed, postpartum depression. Um, yeah, so I felt like it wasn't talked about as much, but I probably had that. I just didn't realize that I did.
Right.
And I was at like a really big low, and I was on a bunch of medications, and I just really didn't feel like myself. I remember sitting in the back of a church meeting, and a teacher was giving a lesson, and she said to me, she just said out loud, you can just choose to be happy. Just have to wake up and decide, and then you're happy. And I just remember wanting to flip her off because I'm like, do you really think I'm choosing to feel miserable?
Yeah.
Like, because I just am miserable and I'm not myself. And I don't even know who I am anymore. This is not fun. This is not what thought I'd signed up for. Like, I hate this. And so I fought that internal dialogue in myself. Is it my choice? Can I just wake up and be happy? But I just couldn't. And now what I've learned over all the years is when you have chemical imbalances, or you have something out of balance in your life, emotionally, spiritually, or physically, it really can make you feel like you're not yourself. But I got to a pretty big low, I would say very big low, where I was just done. I was out the door and decided I can't do this anymore. And so I actually made a plan to end it and just be done. But I was going to go out in style. I make a joke now, but I was going to go out lumpy, frumpy, and happy and eating whatever I wanted, because I've been trying so hard to like diet and exercise and do all the things at that time
Changing
in my
all
life.
the lifestyle things to
Just try to feel better and try to find something, but it just wasn't working. Anyway, I ended up at the grocery store in our small town here in Morgan. And, when you go, most people know you. You're saying hi to everyone. And I actually ran into a friend who had been dealing with some of the same health struggles as me. And I hadn't seen her in a while, but I had my cart full of ice cream, cold cereals, treats that I had been avoiding. And I was just going to go home and eat them, enjoy them, and then call it good and let everybody. Because I just felt like even my kids didn't like me, my husband didn't like me. Some relationships that were really important to me were um, struggling, and probably because of the state that I was in. But I was also blaming these people for how they were acting and towards me. But I also wasn't feeling good at all. But so I ran into this friend at the grocery store, and she saw my cart and she said to me, "That does not look like you." And thank heavens I had talked to her enough that she knew that that was not a normal thing. And so she was like, "What's going on?" And so she took me by the arm and we walked down the aisleway, and I was crying and telling her all about how bad I felt as she was putting cereal back on the thing and walking over to the ice cream freezer. And I didn't even at the time register what she was doing, but she listened for like a while in the grocery store. And then she said, she just made the comment, "I think you need to go see an alternative healthcare provider that I've been going to and try something a little more holistic than you've been doing." And so that was where she left me, like where we left. And just had this question in my mind, like, is there something more for me to be able to go do to take care of myself that I don't know about? And that was where I told myself I would give it one last question. And that question would be, is there something that I can do alternatively for my health and well-being that would benefit me more than what I'm doing now and help me out of this crazy funk? And if there's not, I'm really gonna be there.
You'll take a semicolon on it.
Yeah. So I made the choice that day, like, that I was gonna just give it one more shot.
The first time you told me this story, this is why I wanted to bring you on the podcast. It just hit me so hard, and the emotion of that decision. My world has gone dark. I'm going to decide to go out happy from being whatever that was, and a friend probably feeling, we'll call it a spiritual prompting that there's something off here. Open your mouth and see. Someone could just say, maybe she's buying junk for the kids. Like, they're having a party, and walk on. But something sparked something, a body language, a feeling, an emotion. And then you were able to have a grocery store visit of where you were able to put things back and not even realize it and really have an emotional release. Mm-hmm. So if you're out there and you're someone who's thinking like, I can't help someone, or I don't know how to help people, sometimes it's just being aware.
And I think to this day, she doesn't realize what she did that day.
Yeah.
So.
And maybe that's better. Maybe it's just who she is and how she lives her life. And you don't have to know if you're helping people. It's just be a kind of person who helps people.
Yeah.
I love Mr. Rogers. I grew up watching him. He taught me how to tie my shoes, and one of the messages he had, I really, this sticks out to me, is he says, hey, when you're in a time of need, look around for helpers. They're all around. And when you're in a time of success and things are going well for you, be a helper. So I would assume your friend is very much in line with that.
Yeah. There's actually been other times where she's appeared, like, I don't see her for a long time, and then she's appeared when I needed her for just what she's doing, and then had me thinking, because I had such respect for her, to be like, hey, I'm doing this, and then I'm like, oh, maybe I'll try that, so.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's hard for someone on the outside to understand how to help someone who's in a position like that when someone's in that dark place. I mean, you kind of brought up how you felt like no one liked you, even the people closest to you. And there's almost like a monologue from what I'm hearing you say is like, they'd all be better off without me. I'm doing them a favor.
Well, it's easy to reflect that because I didn't like myself. I didn't like how I was feeling.
Yeah. And it's hard to see a way out when you're kind of in that darkness. So when someone says, hey, like, there might be something else you can do, it sounds like first she listened to you. She let you feel heard. Sounds like she didn't really judge you. And she was supportive of you. And then she gave you one suggestion. Maybe try something else. You have all these medications. They're not working for you. Maybe try something else.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to give it one more shot. And if this doesn't work, go ahead. And I bring up semicolon because that's a kind of a symbol for people who have thought about suicide, who have been really close to suicide. And, let's just give it a little bit more. Let's take it one more day. Let's see if something can change and move forward with a different outcome. Let's explore that. What changed for you? I mean, I know you had this moment, but where to go next?
Yeah, so I made an appointment with the doctor that she suggested. He was a 3-hour drive away, so it wasn't close. And every message that I'd ever gotten about alternative or holistic healthcare was kind of like, ooh, they're voodoo, or it's witchcraft or whatever. And so I kind of had that mentality. Juju. Yeah.
A little less stigma.
Had that mentality that was what I was walking into. But I was pretty desperate, and I just felt like, I could go into all the history of why I felt so desperate, because it's not like I wasn't reaching out in healthcare. It just wasn't working.
Well, you're not alone in that. I mean, the statistics of people who are getting actual help through the medical system are shockingly low.
Yeah, it just wasn't right. It wasn't working, which I think for some it's meant to be for them, and it does, but for others it's not. And so, like, that's what I would tell people now is, if you are struggling with something, there's going to be an answer somewhere. But it might be something you haven't thought about. So I made an appointment with him, and my husband drove me up there, and there were our conversation in the parking lot. And I was like, okay, I'm such a trusting person, and I'm also very loyal. So once I know you, like, you're in my life forever.
All right.
But I was worried that I'd go into this voodoo doctor and that I wouldn't be able to like break away, and that weird things might happen, or it might be uncomfortably spiritually, physically, or mentally, for me. So I tell him, like, if there's any weirdness here, you've got to be the one to say,
It's
get
like
it, stop
it's
it.
like a bad day. Give me a rescue call.
Yeah, like good cop,
Oh
bad
yeah,
cop, like, oh,
car's broken. I gotta go help him out.
yeah. So we kind of had made that plan. Anyway, we went and sat down in the office of this doctor, and he just listened to me for a minute of all the things that I had been dealing with since high school, really, and all my health concerns. And then he wrote down all my medications, and then he pulled out a map of the whole body. And then he went through that and all the hormones and how they, like, everything, and integrated my whole body, not just like, hey, here's your thyroid, hey, here's like all these different things. And he looked at me as a whole person, and then told me what medications were doing what and how they were conflicting one with another. And he's like, this is why you feel like crap, is because this one's doing this and this one's doing this, and they're contradicting, and your body is just confused. And so your spirit can't reside in that body comfortably because it's a mess. And I just cried. I felt so much relief that someone understood. And he said to me, this is not Jill, this is Jill's body. And when we get Jill's body fixed, then Jill will feel a lot better. And that, like, kind of was this aha moment for me of like, I like this mind part of you versus your body part, and like your spirit and your body, that it was separate. Like, they're two separate things, but they were, I mean, we're
They're in
together, but
conflict with each other.
they were in major conflict. And so to have someone understand that and look at me as a whole person, and then he was like, I have a plan, and this is the plan, and we're going to do some alternative care for that, and get you off the medications safely, and monitor you as we're doing that, and then work on how to use more whole natural things, um, even in the food you eat, because food is medicine, right? And so all that I did a bunch of stuff up there with him.
Well, kind of recapping on that, looking at like the ideology of the Western medicine versus Eastern medicine. So in the Western medicine culture, we're very symptomatic. We pick one part of the body and we're going to fix that symptom. If you got a hurt pinky, we're going to figure out why it's hurting and just treat the pinky. But we're not going to look at the knuckle or the hand that's connected to it. Well, in Eastern medicine, it's like, well, those things are touching, they're connected. Whether that's a physical or an emotional thing, let's look at the whole piece. Where if we start to look at that, we're looking more like a root cause, and then we're looking at the whole system as a whole. So you have your spirit that's not feeling comfortable in this body. This body's getting all these mixed messages. It's not functioning or operating right. And you have a doctor who's willing to look at the whole picture and help you get back into an alignment or a balanced state. So there, like, the Jill inside this body can be happier or function better to at least tolerate life.
Yeah.
That's kind of how.
Yeah, I remember after the second treatment, I did some IVs that had like a bunch of vitamins and minerals and stuff in it, to just kind of give me that boost. And after the second treatment, when I had left there and I was driving home, I just couldn't even explain the lightness that I felt for the first time in a long, long time. And it was relief to me. And then as I kept going and finished out like his plan for me and my plan with him, I was a different person, and I was able to do things like I just couldn't bring myself to do like grocery shop for healthy food. When you're really feeling crappy, it is really difficult. And you go to a doctor and they'll be like, if you just eat right and you exercise, you'll be fine. And I'm just like, but when you feel like dirt, it's so hard. It's so hard when you can't even talk yourself to get out of bed because you're not enjoying life. How do you go talk yourself to get out of bed to go grocery shop? And unless you've been there, you're not going to understand. There'll be people who judge that, and they've never experienced that. So they'll be like, you do it, and that's how. But until you've been there, you know, it's really a hard thing to understand. So
Yeah, I had an awesome holistic practitioner who I was working with once, and she compared the food we eat to like an energy frequency. She's like, all right, so when you're in a bad or low mood, you're gonna attract more frequency foods that are on a low nutrition, low health, that match bad or low mood. You know, they might stimulate your mind with some sugar and some fat to make you feel like a short burst to move up. It's like we're trying to fake it. I want to feel better quickly. But ultimately, those same foods, since there's such a low nutrition count, they match with the mood you're feeling, the mood foods.
yeah,
So to go say, hey, I go eat healthy and exercise, it's a big jump. It's like we're running a marathon now. I thought we were going on a walk. So essentially, it's like, look at how can I go from one level to one level? Like, I'm not trying to go all the way up to amazing, but I got to go a little better. So setting that expectation a little more realistic can be a way to do that.
yeah.
So for you, you talked about how there was a change in lifestyle, but before you also brought up that there was some self-hatred or some self-dislike.
Mm-hmm.
How did you shift that part? Because I know like one area can affect another. Like we said, when the pinky might be touching the knuckle. Like how did you get from where you were to starting to move up that side of your life?
Yeah, to be honest about that part is I feel like everyone has their internal struggles. And one of mine since I was very little has always been that inner dialogue of I hate myself. That's been something that is a real trial for me where I'm like, I don't like who I am. And so even so I guess for me, knowing when my body was functioning right, um, chemically, hormonally,
Okay.
right? My body was able to support that spirit a little bit better to be like, no, we got this. You know, like I know that sounds funny, this inner dialogue thing to some, but to some they might understand that. And I still fight that on a regular basis where I'm like, am I good enough? Am I, but not to the point of a depression where I want to take my life because I feel like I have learned so much that when I do have those lows, I know there's modalities that can help me come out of them very quickly.
Define the term modality for the average listener.
So modality is just what all the options out there that you can use um, that will benefit you. So like here at the Cove, right? You've got yoga, you've got the neurofeedback and the oxygen exercise. Those are all modalities.
Right.
I do NMT, which is muscle communication with the body. That's a modality. Foot zoning. I mean, there's all sorts of things out there, right?
Yeah, there's the you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're only getting information from one source and that source doesn't have the answers you need, it's going to feel very isolating. You're going to feel very stuck. But I also want to go back even a little further where that voice of, I hate myself or I'm not good enough. That's sadly, it's a pretty common theme in our culture here in the United States. Um, and we see that through a lot of research. There's a researcher named Brene Brown that a lot of people love and respect.
Yeah, I've read some of her stuff.
She's pretty cool, and she's a what you call a meta researcher. So she takes all this data and she studies the data and then comes out with some research and then talks about it on TED Talks, and everyone's like, "Oh, that's amazing, good job, Brene." But she talked about that voice of "I'm not good enough" is what she called it, and she found that it was incredibly common to a disturbing level. That there's so many people who hear that voice. You're not good enough. You're not good enough. Um, so when we go back to listening to, well, what's underneath that? Like, why do we feel that way so much? And there's a lot of reasons, but one of the biggest ones is culture. So in our culture here in the United States, we're very much a media culture, a look good culture, perform, put your A+ papers on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. You only see the best of people. So then the rest of us, when we have that culture, we start to compare ourselves. I'm never going to be like that model. I'm never going to be like that thinker, whoever that is. And it creates this dissonance in us. It says, well, if I'm never going to be that, well, then I must suck. I'm not good enough. That's one side of it. The other side of it can be upbringing, the culture of our own internal families, parents, grandparents, cousins, uncles, schools, bullies, all that stuff. So I just wanted to bring that up because I think, for one, like, you've done an incredible job of working through that in your life. And it's something that I think we all will continue to work on, myself included. And it's something that I think needs to be normalized, that we're in that space.
Yeah. So as I have gone through like all this health journey, right? And there's a couple things that I've learned. One is healing. The definition of healing is becoming, right? And I love that thought because sometimes I think we think we can just do something and it's going to fix it and we're going to be like perfect, right? And it makes me think about the story of the woman in the Bible of issue of blood 12 years, right? She goes to the Savior and reaches out and in faith is healed. And we hear that story and it feels kind of Cinderella like, right? And we're like, oh, I want to be like the woman of issue of blood and reach out. Is my faith not strong enough? And you ask yourself that, like, is God not a God of miracles anymore? Is it my fault or is it his fault? We can get doubtful to God and, be like, and have no hope in the healing processes, right? And just be like, he doesn't care because I'm not getting better, or I'm not strong enough to have enough faith to reach out to the Savior and have him heal me. Like, what? I'm doing all these things. And so there's that kind of a struggle too that I think that we can have. But it hit me a few years ago when I was reading that scripture. I was like, I wish we had more of her story because, she was shunned from all her people. Like, they wouldn't let her be around them because she had this issue of blood. And she got healed from the Savior, but it doesn't say what happened when she went back and had to rewrite a whole new story for herself being healed. And it made me think about the people who weren't letting her in her life, how many of them believed her that she was actually healed and that they could now be in a space close enough to touch her? She had to probably go back and recreate a whole new story. And that's not easy when you have a story that you've held on to for a long time. So I had a circumstance with an autoimmune disease that I was told for several years it would never go away and that I would deal with that all my life. But there was something in my spirit that felt like God is still God of miracles. I can reach out in faith, and at some point, He's going to allow that to be healed. And I just held on to that with every practitioner I ever met with. I was just like, this is gonna change for me. Like, I know it. But then there was also this inner dialect that was like, oh, it's never gonna change. You don't have enough faith and you suck. And so I fought that battle. But I was with a friend. Well, I just had met her, but we are now really good close friends. I call her my soul sister. But we were chatting and I told her that I had broke up with this autoimmune disease. And she says, wait, you broke up with that? Like, I have that. Don't you have it forever? I'm like, no, not when you put Jesus in the picture. And I just was still hopeful that that was happening for me. And then I had a really cool experience where I felt like um, in the right place, the right time, it was released for me. And I haven't dealt with that autoimmune issue. But having that issue when I did have it, it was my story, right? And I had a lot of people reach out to me. They'd call and say, hey, I had to eat gluten free. That was one of the things. So I had people that would call me like, oh, I have this friend that has the same condition as you. Can I ever call you? And I can't tell you, I had handfuls of women over the years call because they wanted my help in knowing
the formula.
Yeah, they wanted to know what I was doing and they were struggling and they just wanted support, right? Like for somebody who'd already gone through it. And so it was part of who I was. And so when I finally felt like God was like, you don't need to have this anymore. You've learned all you can from it. I was like, wait a second. Now what? Kind of like the woman of issue of blood, right? Now what? Now what's my story? Oh, I have a whole nother story because we're here to become something. And so we're always going to be working on healing, whether that's physically, spiritually, emotionally, or mentally. Everyone has something, or they wouldn't be here because they'd be in a perfect state and not here. But we all have that one thing or two or three or four things that we are working on healing to become. I brought my phone because I have this, there's this thing. So Halbert L. Dunn, He's the father of the wellness movement, known as the father of the wellness movement years ago. So like I studied him and
How
tried
does
to
he
follow
like
his
his
studies.
steak, girl? Just a quick question.
What's that?
How does he like his steak?
I have no idea. I think he's dead. I don't know.
What's his last name again?
Done. Oh.
Well done.
Yes. Well done. Dr. Albert Eldon.
Sorry.
See, if I had like a
That's
memorized
a dad joke.
brain, I would have this memorized, but I just
Okay, let's
can't.
hear it. Let's hear it. No more
So
distractions.
he says he makes a distinction between good health and high level wellness, which to me has really mattered because he says good health is the state of not being ill. So good health is the state of not being well. There are a lot of people out there who are in good health and they're very lucky, and you should count your blessings that that's not your trial. But he talks about high level wellness, and this is what he says: high level wellness is a condition of change in which the individual moves forward, climbing toward a higher potential of functioning. And the wellness is functioning optimally within your current environment and circumstances. And so when we have these times where we're at a low, like I was, being able to, like he said, take that and move forward is actually a higher level of wellness that you're going for than just not having a disease or a sickness or something that is causing you to try to have to become something, if that makes sense.
Oh, totally.
But,
I there's so much to unpack in that, but one thing that stands out to me is higher level wellness is not necessarily what your doctor's going to seek to give you when you go to a doctor. I was learning earlier today about people who get diagnosed with like schizophrenia and extreme bipolar. That's not even a metrics they look at. What they look at is how can we make you safe for us? How can we dole you down so you don't interrupt the rest of society? And unfortunately, the main answer is we're not going to actually help you have a higher level wellness. We're going to have you not be a problem. So they give a lot of medications and such. Mm-hmm. And that kind of bleeds over into a lot of our system-based or symptom-based medicine of we're just going to get you flat. We're going to get you where you're not disruptive. You can still go to work or have some sort of life, but it's not necessarily the life you really want or a life that's meaningful or it's enjoyable. So when you're moving up this health continuum, that's a different approach. And that's where I think alternative medicine is so awesome is let's look at how you can actually enjoy being in your skin.
Yeah. And that's led me to do like what I'm doing now. Is I just felt like for me, finding balance was a big deal. And I want to share that with people that there is a balance in all the things. And when we're out of balance, it just can really affect how we're moving forward or not. And also that you can embrace, the things that you've been given and find gratitude for them, even though there's going to be those inner dialect times where you're just like, I hate your body, or my body just stinks or whatever it is that you feel. And then also the feeling of finding joy in life, when you can shift your focus and you can break up with things. One of the messages that I felt like I gave myself and probably got from society a lot was, well, you're just a mom. You're just a mom. You're just a mom. And I think it bothered me a little bit because I was like, well, to the world, I'm just a mom. And
and the societal twist on that right now is kind of negative.
Yeah.
Oh, you're just a mom.
Yeah. Like
isn't that amazing? Amazing that you're a mom. Isn't that incredible? You're a mom. You're bringing children to this world and raising and rearing human beings. It's a big deal. But I'd say the adversary and the societal push is diminishing motherhood. It's diminishing women. It's diminishing society.
Yeah. And so through my journey, like with all these different modalities, there was one that I found I loved, which is neurological modulation techniques, NMT. And I have used a practitioner over all these years when I have had like these lows or burdens or to reset essentially. And it just has always helped me. And so I lost a baby halfway through pregnancy in 2020, and I was struggling really hard with that. And so I went to do NMT. And as I was sitting with him, I'm like, what am I going to do when you're gone. And he's like, you're going to learn this so that you can treat your family and yourself. And so I was like, okay, I I need something to fill the hole that I had felt, because I was just deeply sad of that loss. And so I signed up to go learn NMT. And they had their first symposium, and um, the people there are very educated people, chiropractors, MDs.
They got a lot of legend.
They do, and they're very, very knowledgeable people. And the guy who was putting on the program or helping, he called me and he said, "Hey, what do I put behind your name?" I said, "What do you mean?" And he's like what? What's your credentials? What do I put behind your name? And I was kind of caught off guard. I'm like,
just a mom.
MOM. I'm like, MOM. He's like, what does that stand for?
Oh no.
I'm like, mom. And he laughed. And I'm like, no, I'm really serious. And it actually turned out I got pregnant. By the time that symposium came, I was pregnant.
By the time it was over.
Yeah. So I was supposed to have the baby a month after the symposium, but I ended up going early and having him. And so I had to take him to the symposium in the little kangaroo pouch. Aww. Well, I didn't have to. I decided to, because I knew that it was important for me to go keep learning this. And so I moved forward in that. And anyway, it was just this crazy thing. But when I showed up, it was funny, because now they all will say, "Oh, our mom NMT," which has just been, okay for me.
I love that. And I love that you just took that and owned it in front of all these professionals and made that part of your story. When I talked about this before, you talked about how breaking up with your diagnosis was almost a hard concept for people to accept. And in these symposiums and these big gatherings, there people are very much labeled like, oh, you are this, you are that, and that's the box you fit in. Mm-hmm. Well, if you look at how diagnosis even works or why it's even available, the DSM-5 is the main criterion for diagnosing a lot of mental health stuff and a lot of different things. And doctors have their criteria. They look at diagnoses, and then they match things and say, this is why you're this is why you're that. That was never really written and designed to be a tool to be shared with the public. It was more of like helping the professionals figure out how to kind of have some guidance to help people. But insurance got involved, and they said, we need to be able to match A with B and make sure that pay here pays there. So they made it like a big thing, and they pushed these diagnostic systems into the public and made you have to have a code when you treat someone to get paid. Well, in my practice, I don't even talk about diagnosis with my clients, because that's not really for them. I talk about what you're saying is, let's break up with your diagnosis. Let's break up with the language that is making you sicker. When you identify with an autoimmune disease, identify with mental illness or whatever it is, you get sicker. You start to fit in that box. It's almost like you're creating a manifestation around the illness and making it grow, like you're feeding it.
Yeah.
So what I hear you saying is like, I broke up with it. I don't identify with it anymore. And now I found a model that works for you, and has worked for a lot of people that didn't know existed until you stumbled upon it, essentially.
And there's just so many things out there to try that can really matter and make a difference in how you're feeling.
There really are, and if you don't explore, you're not gonna find it. But there is a little bit of resistance. We have, not to give too much of history, we have in our United States of America, we have the medical model with the hierarchy, like the people at the top, and there's a lot of insurance, there's a lot of credentialed names that are at the top, and what they say goes. And you can look at how dangerous that is for society too, when you only have one resource for all your information. All the other types of modalities that existed back in post-depression era, there was tons of chiropractic clinics, there was tons of holistic clinics, there was natural medicine, you name it, homeopathy. It was actually pretty common in our country. It was normal to be that way. And the big medical model took it over. So if you go back to like the Rockefeller families, they wanted to make money off of drug prescriptions. They had a lot of interest in it. They systematically went after all these schools, breaking them down, shutting them down. Even in the 1980s, not too long ago, chiropractors were considered total crazies, but there was all this marketing money from millionaire groups projecting into the society that they're quacks. Oh, don't go to the quack doctor.
Yeah.
Don't go quack your back. He's gonna make something broke. But chiropractors were very much more on the holistic body. Let's treat the body. And now you're in an industry that could be considered fringe. And if you listen to the marketing from these big companies, no one's going to jail. That's dangerous. She's going to do harm to you, you know, or no one's going to go do neurofeedback or exercise with oxygen or even cold plunges because that could be dangerous. How do you speak to that? Like, how do you overcome this wave of marketing propaganda that says what we're doing is probably not good for people?
Yeah. So, I really go off the 6 domains of wellness in my life, like in their physical, occupational, intellectual, social, emotional, and your divine spiritual purpose. Right. So I try to balance my life on those things. I try to help people in those areas. And so I feel like having balance in that is good. But in order to do that, I feel like there is good in everyone and what they're doing. Right. So even in Western medicine, like every doctor that I've ended up at, even if I don't agree sometimes with what they say when I end up going there, like I know that they're in their field because they care a whole heck of a lot and they have a love and a passion for what they did or they wouldn't be there. And if they are there and they love it and they're hating it, my advice is get out of it.
Yeah.
You're not doing anybody any favor,
do it
including
differently.
yourself, or do it differently and it's okay. But for most times, like that's what I remember. And I think that all of it is created to help people in some way. So for me, I had to break up with a couple things, and I have this in each of those areas is some things that I've broken up with, the ideas and the stories that I've allowed people to tell me or that I've created myself in some of these. And I think that's kind of like that fight, the inner dialogue too, right? It's this fight that I'm trying to like flip that manifesting it in a different way. But healthcare wise, to be like, you've got alternative care over here, you've got Western here, and they can't see each other, but to be able to like merge those when it's necessary or when that time is right, or and to not be um, negative to either side of that, but to be open to that, because I do believe that there are people out there in those areas in Western medicine that are there to bless people's lives because that person needs it. And so I think the biggest thing I would say and suggest to people is that you listen to your gut and your heart, and that's it. You don't go to a doctor and have them say to you, look, you have to do this and you have to do this, you have to be on this medication. You take their information that they gave you, you study it out for yourself, and you decide if it brought you peace and if it feels good to you, then you can move forward in that. But if you're struggling with questioning, like this doesn't seem like this fits me, then it doesn't, and you shouldn't do it. And I've learned that lesson the hard way by taking some medications that were just like, hey, you've got to do this and you've got to, or this will happen, and where deep down I felt like, don't do that, don't do that. And then, I've had a lot of health things, and am I think that partly it's from some of those things that I knew I shouldn't do that I did, and the repercussions of side effects of those things. But that being said, I know there's a place for all of those things because I think they were all created for someone at some point at some time.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good observation when you recognize that someone doesn't want to become a doctor unless they have a desire to help people. Where I feel like there's a burn, or where I've been burned, and my family's been burned, is by overly trusting the prescription.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, here's the answer. When a lot of our medical system doesn't allow doctors to sit down and talk to someone for more than 15 minutes, they're not going to really have a deep understanding of what you really need. But they might have, like, oh, I've seen 100 people just like you. Here's a prescription.
Yeah.
So we have to become experts in our own health. we have to be biased towards ourselves and say, all right, what's my gut? What's my intuition? What's my own research saying? Is this going to work for me or not work for me? Are there other things I can do to supplement this or improve this? Otherwise, you will get burned. And it does happen. Accidents happen a lot in the medical field, and far more on the medical side than they do on the alternative side, in my opinion, because they are taking bigger risks with big medications and big things. And personally, I've been burned so many times that I'm very, very resistant to go to a doctor unless it's like I'm very, very sick. So it's stitches and super sick. Like that's about all I'm going to a doctor for. Everything else is going to be lifestyle. It's going to be supplements. It's going to be food. It's going to be exercise and all those elements of health you're talking about. And if we can get people to focus on those elements of health, they may not need to go to a doctor as much or go to some other place to get help if they're taking care of those bases. Do you want to speak to those a little bit better? Like, why are they so essential today, and how do we get people to accept them as part of their own life routine?
Yeah. So I think when you look up different definitions of medicine, you'll find Western medicine, Eastern medicine, alternative medicine, information medicine. I mean, there's so many definitions of medicine, but I think that we're trending now more into a society where people are wanting to govern themselves. Maybe like generation, a little bit older generations, you did what your dad told you or you got spanked.
Yeah.
And then that ended, and we're like, I know for with my kids, I have 18 to 3-year-old, and they're just coming with these personalities that are like, I want to decide, like, and they're really stubborn. And if you don't help them make a decision to create it for themselves, it can really be a conflict. And so I think that when we consider the personalities of people and their spirits that they have of this need to create for themselves. And so I think when you look at this healthcare, it's creating for yourself the pathway that you feel is the best for you. And I feel like if we could all merge all of this together, then we would have um,
A renaissance?
more complete health stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because I really do feel like there's good in all of it, and it's balancing that. But it's also like you said, I mean, there's times where you just go to a doctor and they like, I'm overweight. Hello, you can see that. It's okay, but I know why I am. I know the story behind it, and I can't go to a practitioner or a like doctor and spend the time telling them my story to have them be like, oh, okay, that's why. So I show up and they're like, well, if you lose weight and you exercise, you will, and eat right. If you need it, you need to lose weight, and if you eat right and exercise, all will be well. It will be fixed, right? But in the meantime, here's medication for this, or here's, and like I know that there's a process in learning and becoming something, and it's sometimes tough to hear those kinds of things, right? And so I think I just come back to that thought of you have to be the creator of your own health journey, and that can look um, and should be open to all the ways every time you ebb and flow in those. Because like for me right now, I'm in a state of health that again, I'm just like, Heavenly Father, like, why are you giving me this trial right now? Like, why do I have this? I just felt like a couple of years ago I was in a state of like being healed, and feeling like I'd reached out and the Savior said, hey, take this. And then rewriting the story, like the woman of issue of blood, we don't know what else happened to her. We think it's Cinderella. I was in that place where I was doing all alternative care and eating right and being active, and I felt like I was in that story of Cinderella, like a Cinderella, like, okay, this is true. I can manifest this. I can, I've read books. I've had like where you can heal yourself to by manifesting it, and have talked to life coaches that are like, well, it's just what you're telling yourself. And that is also hard for somebody who has an inner dialect of that you feel bad about yourself, because then what you do is you can turn that to yourself to say, I suck. because I can't. I have this health issue. My body's overweight right now. I am way into health and wellness. Like if you knew how much I studied about it, like I probably do it way more than the person who looks like they're, like
The skinny fats.
the people who are just, they don't care. And I go with them and I see what they're eating. I'm like, oh man, or whatever. But I just now I can't remember where I was going with that, but I just feel like I don't know. Everyone's journey is different, and
Well,
can't remember what we were.
when we're kind of looking at this, there's a perspective that we need to shift. Like one is like, I will only be happy when I reach a certain level. And going back to the founder of wellness, where he's like, it's more like a state of let's just live a little better. And the continuum of health is generally seeking to improve every area of your life. Doesn't mean you're going to be the perfect version of you. You're not going to be totally healed in a certain way. I look at this from more of a stoic approach. I'm really into stoic philosophy, and it's something that has resonated with me. And for those who are not super familiar with stoic philosophy, it's like Socrates and those guys. And there's one particular philosopher that I just love. I read his work, and I'm like, that's dude, I relate to him. I'm like sitting in his lecture and whatever BC time he was talking. His name is Epictetus, and he talks so much about disassociating yourself with all the things you cannot control. Like you cannot control if you're a slave. You can't control if you're the king. Like you can't control if bad things happen to you. You can't control if good things happen to you. But what you can control is how you respond to everything and how you choose to live your life. And Epictetus, he was crippled. He had he was a dead leg, and he was a slave for a lot of his life. And this guy just chose to live in a way that he could be present in his life. It didn't require all these outside things to make him feel good. So my personal journey with that is I look at, can I accept my life as it is today? And sometimes I'll ask myself this question, and I'll ask this question to people I work with too. And I'll ask myself, is everything exactly as it should be? And I'll kind of pause and sit in that. Is everything exactly as it should be? And if I'm feeling a strong response, it's like, no, 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 no. I'm like, well, then am I focusing on the stuff I can't control? So if I'm focusing on the stuff I can control, then it is exactly as it should be. Today, right now, in this moment, I'm doing what I can. I accept my life as it is today, and it's perfect. And then I can move on. It's like as soon as I accept that I'm okay, I am good enough, my life is fine, now I can go work on the stuff that I actually have a small measure of control and work from the inside out and bring more peace into my life.
Yeah, I like that.
So a piece I think I want to relay, and then we can start wrapping up, is this art of becoming. It's present. It's today. It's where you're living now. It's not tomorrow. It's not in the past. It's living presently. What could you speak to the art of becoming? I mean, I think it's an art form because it's not something you just do overnight.
Yeah, I think we do it till the day we die, to be honest, because I watched, family that have aged, family that we've lost early. It is that process, but I think the art of becoming for me is finding balance in all the areas of life, and maybe simplifying a little bit what we think we have to do to what we just can do, like you said, to be more present and more in tune, with the choices that we're making, and to realize that we have choice, you know and every day we're making them all the time. And so when you're in a health crisis, what are the choices that you can make? And if you don't know what modality you could go do, maybe go start talking to people, right? Like to see what else is out there and what you could try that might be a benefit. I know I just came into neurofeedback for the first time a couple weeks ago, and it was I'd been here and I'd listened to it and I was just like, oh, I'm not going to like worry about doing that. And then I had a friend call that was like, hey, have you heard anything about neurofeedback? And her and I had been very close. And I'm like, well, I'll go try it for her, like just to
Yeah,
go
to get a
experiment
test.
basically. But when I was dealing with it, that just a couple weeks ago, it was a release and relief for me. And I was like, oh, I kind of like neurofeedback as a modality, right? And so that was an interesting thing because I didn't do it for myself at that time because in my head I didn't think that I needed to try it yet,
Yeah.
and I didn't even know if I ever would. But then I was like, yeah, I'll go see what it's like, and then I felt the benefits after, and so um, that has been I think that's what I would just say is don't be afraid to break up with an idea that you've been told, whether that's that you can't get rid of a sickness or disease, like you said, or, like I was told with this autoimmune, I don't have any of that blood work that's a problem anymore. Now other blood work's a problem, but the part that was that autoimmune is not there anymore. And that was really powerful because I felt like I'd asked my practitioner once, why haven't I been able to heal from this? I've worked so hard on it over 10 years, time. And he said, when I see people work this hard, there's only a couple answers that I have. And one is that they don't believe that they can. And he says, which I don't think is your case, or that God still needs you to learn more from it. And that's why. And so no matter what you do as you're becoming something, he needs you to become something maybe different than you realize. And that's the hard part that it's hard to accept because we have this idea of, hey, look, I am a health and wellness guru. Like I know a lot of stuff about a lot of things, but I don't look health and wellness to a lot of people because my body just isn't cooperating in that way. But I'm learning an awful lot, and I have learned to really be able to be empathetic with people, and I'm kind of a safe place for that person who doesn't feel comfortable going to someone who is going to tell them eat right and exercise and you'll lose weight and feel better, right? Like I have a lot of people come that are just like, thank you for listening to my story because I I'm here, and I feel like I understand because I've been where a lot of these people that come to me have been. I've been in those lows. I've been where I'm questioning why I'm not healing. I've been, no matter how hard I've tried, and I've questioned all those things. And so I think I have a lot more compassion for people when they do show up at my door and want some help. And I feel like that's been a really big blessing and part of my story and will continue to be, as you struggle through things. I I feel like I get bothered sometimes by the idea that you can manifest no sickness or disease because who would manifest cancer on themselves or a loved one or some other major issue that's got them down. We're in a world and the world gives us stuff and we're going to get it, and some are going to get it harder than others, but it's going to help us be able to find love for one another because we understand what someone else is going through, and we can be that person in the grocery store that reaches out and is like, hey, we've been talking about this for a while and I know that this is not normal for you, so let me help you and let me save your life. And I think that that's why we deal with these things and why sometimes you know it we don't get the answers right away and we can't say, yeah, I healed, but we can remember that healing is becoming, and the art of it, when we look back at it, we'll see the whole grand picture, and it will, we're looking at it like this right now and we can't necessarily see why this trial or this problem is with us, but when we look at a distance later, it'll all make sense. Just like my autoimmune disease, looking back at that and that whole story, I feel like that was a book and I closed it, but that book is precious because of all the things I learned. But there were times where I was at very lows, and I was mad at God and I was yelling and like, you don't care about me, like, or you would help this and I wouldn't have to deal with this and I wouldn't have to be in this body that's overweight right now if you cared. But I know he cares. I know that there's miracles still. I've seen him in my own life, and I have to remind myself all the time in that inner dialect of like, yep, this you're becoming something, and you're becoming something great that will be able to help other people become and be great and feel that love that they they need to enjoy life, because we're supposed to have joy, right? We're here in life to have joy, but we sometimes miss that because we're so busy trying to do all these things. So,
well, Jill, I love all that share, all the share, and all that perspective, and it makes me feel like there's more hope. I do see that we get stuck sometimes, and we just need a little push, need a little hope. And I feel like you've inspired me to feel a little more hope today, and I'm assuming that people are listening and watching might feel that.
yeah, I hope so.
And when you're in that mess, you don't necessarily can see it. Like you said, it's hard to see the end from the beginning. But when you widen out your view and you open up the perspective, and sometimes really wide. I'm talking like, let's think about the whole life and before you came here and when you die and 1,000 years from now, and you look at this huge view, you say, what do I need to learn to get to my optimal state of being, my health continuum in this life and in the next? And those little chapters, those books you write are pivotal for you to grow into the soul you're supposed to be, to the creation that God made. So that wider view, which is hard to see when you're in it, can create a lot of peace. And going back to Epictetus, I'll say one more thing. He said life is like you're in a big parade, and you come down here, you're on a stage, you're waving at the crowds, and you're meeting everybody, you're seeing everybody, and then the parade ends, and it's time for you to get off the stage, and someone else is going to get on. And then it's never meant to be the whole show. Like, we have a bigger thing happening here. And when our Creator, our God says it's time to come home, that's when we go home. Not a minute before and not a minute after. Yeah. And when our ticket's punched, that's when we get on our train and head home and do the next adventure.
And I think it's okay to accept. Sometimes I think we're told, oh, you can't have fear. You can't be mad. You can't feel resentment towards God. You can't, all these negative emotions. But He created those emotions. So I think He's like, okay that we have them,
Absolutely.
and that we go through that, because that's how we learn. And this life is about learning too,
And if you look at the time perspective, like this, God's this great creator. We're like toddlers. When a toddler throws a fit and a tantrum, God's like, I hate you, toddler. Being a parent, when we have a little child that has a fit and a tantrum, I'm sorry you're feeling struggle. I love you. Let's figure this out. I think Heavenly Father, our God, He sees us that way too. Like, yeah, you are struggling. You're going through so much right now. I'm right here for you. I'm with you, but I'm not going to be mad at you for that. You yelled at me. Okay. I'm tough.
Yeah.
I can handle it.
The first 3 kids, I don't know, I was very good at handling their tantrums, but my 3-year-old, that's one thing that works for him is when he's in those modes, if I just like take him and embrace him, he just like almost melts. And I think that sometimes we have to just allow that feeling to come, that we are being embraced, so that we can have that like release that you said.
Yeah, and I think the challenge for us is to not close the door on God. And during those dark times, we can feel the pain, we're going to feel the struggles, we can be angry, we can scream and shout, but maybe don't completely shut the door. Yeah. Like, trust that if you can trust that there is a plan for you, and even though it's difficult, it's hard, and things suck, there's a greater purpose.
Yeah.
And in that kind of mindset, we can heal in the moment and in the long term. And we can be healed even when we're sick if we have the right mindset. Like, that's ultimate acceptance. I accept that I have these trials and they can be good for me. Not that I want a bunch more, but I can be good and live in a way that experiences joy, it's becoming, and experiences peace, while simultaneously struggling in this world of difficulty, which to the outside observer seems so strange, that Jill can have peace and happiness and not have all the other things that you would think you would need to fill those.
Yeah.
Well, Jill, thank you so much for your time. Anything else you want to wrap up with? Any last feeling or thought that we need to touch on before we call this a day?
Not that I can think of. I think, I mean, I could talk all day. So if anybody wants to, I'm here. But,
Well, thank you, Jill. Appreciate you.
Okay.